Beyond the iron gates on Pennsylvania Avenue stands a house that doesn't feel like a house. 132 rooms spread across 6 floors, 35 bathrooms, 28 fireplaces, a situation room buried beneath the rose garden. Powerful, yes, but that's just the facade. Behind these white walls are bulletproof windows, underground tunnels, radiation shields, and a staff of 96 people who know secrets they can never tell. The security costs pile up like bodies in a war. Then assassinations, scandals, nervous breakdowns. To keep the dream alive, every president must surrender their privacy, their safety, their sanity. A fishbowl instead of a home, surveillance instead of freedom. And there's more. Enslaved labor that built it, deaths that haunt it, and a violence you won't see on postcards. Can power make you immortal if it slowly destroys everyone who touches it? And the real question, who actually owns the White House, and how much does this symbol cost the people who live inside it? If you enjoy deep investigations into American power and the buildings that house it, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which government building to explore next. Your support makes these detailed stories possible. Thank you for being here. Let's begin. The United States is 18 years old, barely holding together. The Constitution is ratified in 1788, but the young nation has no permanent capital. Congress meets in New York, then Philadelphia, moving like a government in exile. The problem is geography and power. Northern states, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, are commercial, urban, increasingly opposed to slavery. They want the capital in the north where they can control it. Southern states, Virginia, the Carolinas, Georgia, are agricultural, rural, dependent on enslaved labor. They want the capital in the South, where Northern morality won't threaten their economy. The deadlock threatens to fracture the Union before it truly begins. The solution comes from a dinner. Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton needs Southern votes to pass his financial plan, the federal government assuming state debts from the Revolutionary War. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson opposes the plan but needs Northern support for a Southern capital. They negotiate over dinner in New York. The deal: Hamilton gets his financial plan, Jefferson gets a capital on the Potomac River, carved from Maryland and Virginia, Southern territory. The Residence Act passes Congress in July 1990. President Washington is authorized to select the exact location and oversee construction of a new capital city. Washington chooses a site he knows well, too well. The land sits on the Potomac River, where it meets the Anacostia, swampy, prone to flooding, malarial in summer. But Washington owns land nearby, so do his friends and relatives. When the federal government purchases land for the new capital, Washington and his associates profit. The first act of the capital is corruption. But that is a small sin compared to what comes next. Washington hires Pierre Shaw Lafont, a French engineer who served in the Revolutionary War, to design the new capital city. Lafont envisions grandeur, wide boulevards radiating from central monuments, public squares, a city to rival Paris or London. At the center, 2 buildings, the Capitol, where Congress will meet, and the President's House. The President's House is meant to project authority without monarchy, a residence that announces permanence, dignity, Republican virtue. In 1792, a design competition is announced. Thomas Jefferson submits an entry anonymously. It loses. The winner? James Hoban, an Irish-born architect working in Charleston, South Carolina. His design draws from Leinster House in Dublin, a Palladian mansion built for Irish aristocracy. The style is classical, symmetrical, restrained. 3 stories, white painted sandstone, a portico with columns. The style says, "We are civilized, we are European, we are legitimate." The budget is $400,000. It will cost far more, and the cost will not be measured only in money. Construction begins October 1792. The cornerstone is laid October 13th in a Masonic ceremony attended by Washington himself. The stone is blessed, positioned, aligned with L'Enfant's grand street grid. Then comes the question everyone understands, but no one states publicly. Who will build it? Washington, D.C. sits on the border between free and slave states. The land comes from Maryland and Virginia, both slave states. The men designing this capital, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, are slaveholders. They understand economics. Free labor costs wages. Enslaved labor costs only food, shelter, and the initial purchase price. The federal government does not directly own enslaved people to build the president's house. That would be too visible, too hypocritical for a nation supposedly built on liberty. Instead, the government hires contractors. The contractors hire enslaved laborers. Records housed in the National Archives show enslaved men quarry sandstone at Aquia Creek, Virginia. They load it onto boats, they haul it to the construction site, they cut it, shape it, lay it course by course. They mix mortar in the brutal summer heat, they fire bricks in kilns, they dig foundations through clay and bedrock. They are carpenters, stonemasons, ironworkers, blacksmiths. Skilled tradesmen whose expertise is stolen, whose labor is unpaid beyond survival rations. Some are hired out by their enslavers who pocket the wages, typically $5 per month per worker. The enslaved person receives nothing. Some work alongside free black laborers and European immigrants, Irish, Scottish, Italian stonemasons brought for specialized work. The integrated workforce creates a strange reality, free and enslaved working side by side, the only difference being chains. The work is brutal. Stone dust burns lungs. Summer heat in the Potomac Valley reaches 100 degrees with suffocating humidity. There is no shade on the construction site. Water is scarce. Men collapse. Some die. The deaths are not recorded. Enslaved workers have no names in official documents, only counts. 12 Negro laborers hired for foundation work. 8 Negro carpenters for interior joinery. Numbers, not names, not people. The President's House, the symbol of American democracy, the building where freedom will be proclaimed, is built by people who have no freedom. The irony is not lost on abolitionist observers, but Washington, D.C. is a compromise. Everything about it is compromise, including its soul. November 1st, 1800. President Adams, the second President of the United States, arrives at the nearly completed President's House. George Washington, who selected the site and oversaw early construction, died in December 1799. He never lived here. He never saw the finished building. Adams steps into a structure that is magnificent in concept, miserable in execution. The exterior looks impressive. White painted sandstone gleams in the autumn light. The north portico provides a columned entrance. The south facade overlooks what will eventually be a lawn, but is currently a construction site. Mud, lumber piles, workers' shacks. Inside is chaos. Only 6 rooms are plastered and habitable. Most walls are bare brick or unfinished stone. There is no running water. Servants haul it from springs half a mile away. There are no indoor toilets. Chamber pots and outdoor privies serve. The grand staircase is unfinished. Fireplaces work, barely. 13 of them must burn constantly to combat the damp, and even then the rooms stay cold and smell of mildew. The East Room, designed as the largest public reception space, is completely unfinished. No plaster, no floor, no ceiling. First Lady Abigail Adams uses it to hang laundry. Clotheslines stretch across the cavernous space, shirts and linens dripping onto raw floorboards. Adams writes to Abigail before she arrives, "I pray heaven to bestow the best of blessings on this house and all that shall hereafter inhabit it. May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof." The prayer is sincere. It will later be carved into the mantelpiece of the state dining room. What Adams does not mention is the misery of living here. The house is too large to heat, too expensive to finish, too isolated to be comfortable. Washington, D.C. itself is a disaster. L'Enfant's grand boulevards are muddy tracks. The Capitol building is half finished. There are no hotels, no shops, no theaters. Diplomats assigned to Washington view it as a hardship post, a punishment. Washington loses the 1800 election to Thomas Jefferson. He lives in the president's house for exactly 4 months. On March 4, 1801, he leaves before Jefferson's inauguration. He does not attend the ceremony. He is bitter, exhausted, glad to escape. Jefferson moves in and immediately begins changing everything. Thomas Jefferson is a man of profound contradictions, and the president's house reflects everyone. He is an architect, the designer of Monticello, a scholar of Palladian principles. He believes the president's house is too grand, too monarchical, so he democratizes it. He opens the house to the public. On New Year's Day and the 4th of July, any citizen can walk in, shake the president's hand, tour the rooms. No appointments, no barriers. Farmers in work clothes stand in line with merchants in silk. Frontiersmen with rifles slung over their shoulders wait beside diplomats in formal dress. Jefferson greets them all. This is Republican virtue made visible. But Jefferson also runs the president's house on enslaved labor. He brings enslaved workers from Monticello, his Virginia plantation, to serve as cooks, footmen, housekeepers, and body servants. Among them, James Hemings, his chef, trained in French cooking during Jefferson's time as ambassador to France. Hemings is enslaved, though Jefferson will later negotiate his freedom in exchange for Hemings training a replacement. The kitchen, located in the basement, is staffed almost entirely by enslaved people. They prepare elaborate French-inspired meals for state dinners. They serve foreign diplomats from countries where slavery is illegal or fading. They are invisible in the public rooms, essential in private. Jefferson renovates the house to make this invisibility architectural. He builds a dumbwaiter so food can be sent from the basement kitchen to the dining room without servants climbing stairs visibly. Guests see the food appear as if by magic. He adds low colonnades on the east and west sides of the house, connecting to service wings. These will later be expanded into the east and west wings. He plants gardens. He builds a wine cellar stocked with European vintages. He installs scientific instruments, a barometer, a telescope, to cultivate his image as a man of learning. The president's house under Jefferson becomes refined, functional, and deeply hypocritical. He writes eloquently about liberty. He lives surrounded by people in chains. Jefferson serves 2 terms, 1801 to 1809. He leaves the president's house more comfortable than he found it, but the moral foundation remains rotten. James Madison becomes president in 1809. He is small, quiet, scholarly, nicknamed Little Jimmy by opponents who mistake his size for weakness. His wife, Dolly Madison, is the opposite, tall, social, charming, a born hostess. She transforms the president's house into a center of Washington's social life. Dolly hosts weekly receptions, drawing rooms, where politicians, diplomats, and citizens mingle. She wears turbans and bright dresses. She serves ice cream, still a novelty. She makes the president's house feel alive. But outside the drawing rooms, tensions build. Britain and France are at war. Both nations interfere with American shipping. Britain impresses American sailors, kidnaps them from American ships, and forces them into the Royal Navy. Western settlers and politicians, the war hawks, demand action. They want to invade British Canada, expand American territory, prove American strength. Madison resists at first, then yields. On June 18, 1812, the United States declares war on Britain. The War of 1812 begins. It goes badly. American forces invade Canada. They are defeated. Detroit falls to the British. American generals prove incompetent. By 1814, Britain has defeated Napoleon in Europe. Now British forces can focus on America. In August 1814, a British fleet sails into Chesapeake Bay. Troops land in Maryland. Their target? Washington, D.C. The American militia sent to stop them breaks and runs. The Battle of Bladensburg, just outside Washington, is a rout. The British march on the capital. Madison flees. Dolly Madison stays as long as she dares. August 24th, 1814. Late afternoon. Dolly Madison receives word. British troops are hours away. She must leave immediately. She refuses to leave empty-handed. The president's house contains artifacts of the young nation's identity. George Washington's portrait by Gilbert Stuart, a full-length painting in a massive gilded frame, hangs in the state dining room. Dolly orders it saved. The portrait is bolted to the wall. The frame is screwed into the plaster. There is no time to remove it properly. Servants, enslaved men whose names appear in Dolly's letters only as Tom and John, break the frame with axes. They cut the canvas from its stretcher and roll it. Dolly takes official papers, silverware stamped with the presidential seal, and a few personal items. Then she flees. By nightfall, British soldiers enter the president's house. Admiral George Cockburn, commanding the invasion force, walks through the empty rooms. He reportedly sits at the dining table, pours himself wine, and toasts Jemmy's health, a mocking reference to President Madison. Then he gives the order. Soldiers pile furniture in the center of rooms. They soak it with rocket fuel, a paste made of gunpowder and petroleum used in Congreve rockets. They light torches. The president's house burns. Flames consume the interior completely. The heat is so intense that the sandstone walls crack, the roof collapses, window glass melts and runs down the walls like tears. Copper sheets from the roof curl and blacken. The fire burns through the night. By dawn, only the shell remains, charred, hollow, a blackened skeleton standing against the morning sky. The British also burn the Capitol, the Treasury, and other government buildings. Then a thunderstorm arrives. Some call it a hurricane. The rain extinguishes the fires. The British withdraw. Washington, D.C. is saved by weather, but the president's house is destroyed. The question facing Congress: rebuild or abandon? Some argue for moving the capital. Philadelphia is safer, more established. Others want to move west, closer to the expanding frontier. But moving would be surrender. The British burned Washington to humiliate the young republic. Abandoning it would complete that humiliation. Congress votes to rebuild. $500,000 appropriated. James Hoban, the original architect, is hired again. The work is urgent. The government needs a functioning capital. The president's house must be restored not just as a residence, but as a symbol that America endures. Hoban surveys the damage. The exterior walls are intact structurally, but scorched black. Workers scrub them with sand and chemicals. The stains won't come out. Solution? Paint them white. Thick white paint covers the fire damage. This is when the name begins to shift. Informally, people start calling it the White House, though official documents still say President's House or Executive Mansion. The interior must be completely rebuilt. New timber is sourced, oak beams, pine floorboards, walnut for fine joinery. Plaster is mixed and applied. Windows are replaced with glass imported from Europe. The grand staircase is reconstructed. The East Room is finally completed properly. Plaster, floors, chandeliers. The workforce, again, is mixed. Enslaved laborers, free black workers, European craftsmen, local carpenters. The cost exceeds estimates. The work takes longer than promised. But by September 1817, the house is ready. President James Monroe moves in. Monroe oversees the final furnishings. He wants European sophistication to prove America has arrived as a nation. He orders furniture from France, gilded chairs, ornate mirrors, silk draperies in red, blue, and green. These colors will define the red room, blue room, and green room, receiving rooms for different types of guests. The rebuilt President's House is more refined than the original, more expensive, more symbolic. But underneath the white paint and French furniture, the building carries a scar. It has burned once. It can burn again. And everyone who lives here will feel that vulnerability. For the next decade, the President's House becomes what it was meant to be, the residence and office of the chief executive. James Monroe, 1817 to 1825, establishes the Monroe Doctrine, warning European powers not to interfere in the Americas. He conducts diplomacy from the President's House, hosting foreign ministers in the newly decorated receiving rooms. John Quincy Adams, 1825 to 1829, son of John Adams, moves in with his wife, Louisa. Adams is intellectual, awkward, unpopular. He loses re-election to Andrew Jackson in a bitter campaign. Adams is one of the few early presidents who does not own enslaved people, but the President's House still runs on enslaved labor. The pattern continues. Every president either brings enslaved workers from their private estates or hires enslaved labor locally. The basement is staffed by people in chains who cook, clean, launder, and maintain the building that symbolizes freedom. The cognitive dissonance is profound, but it is barely remarked upon. This is America in the 1820s. Slavery is normal in half the country. The contradiction between stated ideals and lived practice is accepted, ignored, or justified through elaborate moral gymnastics. The President's House is not exceptional, it is typical, and that is the tragedy. Andrew Jackson wins the 1828 election as a populist hero. Old Hickory, the general who defeated the British at New Orleans, the Indian fighter, the man of the people. His inauguration, March 4, 1829, is chaos. Thousands of supporters flood Washington. They pack the Capitol for the inauguration ceremony. Then they follow Jackson to the President's House for a public reception. The crowd is massive. They surge through the doors. They track mud across carpets. They break furniture climbing on it to see Jackson. They drink the punch bowls dry. Fights break out. Jackson flees to a hotel to escape the mob. Servants eventually lure the crowd outside by placing barrels of whiskey on the lawn. The People's House becomes literal, and it is a disaster. Jackson's presidency is transformative and brutal. He expands presidential power. He vetoes legislation aggressively. He destroys the Second Bank of the United States. He ignores the Supreme Court. And he orders the forced removal of Native American tribes from the Southeast, the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Seminole, to land west of the Mississippi. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 leads to the Trail of Tears. Thousands die during forced marches. Jackson signs the orders from the President's House. He also brings enslaved workers from his Tennessee plantation, the Hermitage. They serve in the kitchen and as personal valets. Jackson lives in the president's house for 8 years. He leaves in 1837, aging and ill, but politically triumphant. The president's house under Jackson becomes a tool of executive power wielded without restraint. The building does not limit him, it enables him. The next 24 years see a succession of presidents, most of them forgettable, most of them weak. Martin Van Buren, 1837 to 1841, faces an economic depression. He loses re-election. William Henry Harrison, 1841, gives a 2-hour inauguration speech in the cold rain without a coat. He develops pneumonia. He dies 31 days into his presidency, the first president to die in office. His body lies in state in the East Room, the first of many deaths the White House will witness. Millard Fillmore, 1850 to 1853, Franklin Pierce, 1853 to 1857, and James Buchanan, 1857 to 1861, serve without distinction. But during these years, the nation fractures over slavery. The Compromise of 1850 tries to balance free and slave states. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 leads to violence in Kansas. Abraham Lincoln arrives in Washington under threat of assassination. The Pinkerton Detective Agency has uncovered a plot to kill him as his inaugural train passes through Baltimore. Lincoln travels in disguise, arriving at night, a humiliation he never forgives. He moves into a president's house that is crumbling and vulnerable. The building is 50 years old and showing every year. Carpets are worn through, furniture is broken, wallpaper peels. The East Room has water stains on the ceiling. Mary Todd Lincoln, the First Lady, is horrified. She immediately lobbies Congress for renovation funds. Congress appropriates $20,000. Mary spends $27,000. She orders new carpets, wallpaper, furniture, china. She replaces gaslight fixtures. She redecorates the staterooms in French Empire style. The press attacks her extravagance while soldiers die in the field, but Mary insists the White House must project strength even as the nation fractures. Lincoln cares less about decor. He cares about survival. By April 1861, the war begins. Virginia secedes and joins the Confederacy. The Confederate capital moves to Richmond, Virginia, 100 miles from Washington. Washington, D.C. is surrounded by hostile territory. If the Confederacy attacks, the city could fall in days. Lincoln orders defensive measures. Soldiers camp on the White House lawn, infantry companies patrol the grounds, sharpshooters position on the roof, the windows are reinforced with iron bars. The White House becomes a fortress. Lincoln spends nights in the War Department telegraph office, reading dispatches from battlefields. The news is almost always bad. Bull Run, July 1861, Union defeat. Confederate forces are 20 miles from Washington. The Peninsular Campaign, 1862, failure. General McClellan cannot take Richmond. Antietam, September 1862, tactical draw, but 23,000 casualties in a single day, the bloodiest day in American history. Fredericksburg, December 1862, catastrophic Union defeat. Chancellorsville, May 1863, another loss despite numerical superiority. Lincoln reads casualty lists. Names, numbers, boys dead in fields far from home. He cannot sleep. His secretaries, John Nicolay and John Hay, report finding him at 3 a.m., pacing the second-floor hallway, muttering to himself. Meanwhile, the White House itself is falling apart and taking a toll. In February 1862, Lincoln's son, Willie, age 11, contracts typhoid fever, almost certainly from contaminated water in the White House's primitive plumbing system. Willie dies on February 20th, 1862. His body is prepared in the Green Room. The funeral is held in the East Room. Mary Todd Lincoln is shattered. She never enters those rooms again during her time in the White House. She holds seances in the Red Room, hiring spiritualists who claim to contact Willie's spirit. Lincoln attends at least one, either to humor Mary or because he himself is desperate for comfort. The White House during the Civil War is not a symbol of power. It is a building filled with grief, surrounded by soldiers, haunted by death. Lincoln's appearance deteriorates visibly. Photographs from 1861 show a man with relatively smooth faces and dark hair. By 1864, he looks 20 years older. His face is deeply lined. His eyes are sunken. His hair is gray. He tells a friend, "I feel as though I shall never be glad again." But he continues, because stopping means the Union collapses. Gettysburg, July 1863, Union victory. The Confederacy's invasion of the North is stopped. Vicksburg, July 1863, Union victory. The Mississippi River is controlled. Slowly, the war turns. By 1864, General Ulysses S. Grant is grinding down Confederate forces in Virginia. General William Sherman marches through Georgia. Lincoln wins re-election in November 1864 against General McClellan, who runs on a platform of negotiated peace. On April 9, 1865, General Robert E. Lee surrenders at Appomattox Courthouse. The war is over. Lincoln allows himself a moment of relief. 5 days later, he goes to Ford's Theater. Good Friday, April 14, 1865. Lincoln attends a play at Ford's Theater, Our American Cousin, a comedy. He wants distraction after 4 years of war. His bodyguard leaves his post to get a drink. At 10:15 p.m., John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer and actor, enters the president's box. He shoots Lincoln in the back of the head with a Derringer pistol. Lincoln slumps forward. He never regains consciousness. He is carried across the street to a boarding house, the Peterson House. The White House is too far. He will die before they can get him there. Lincoln dies at 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, standing at the bedside, reportedly says, "Now he belongs to the ages." Lincoln's body is returned to the White House. He lies in state in the East Room, the same room where his son Willie's funeral was held 3 years earlier. Thousands file past the open casket. The room is draped in black. The mirrors are covered. The White House has become a tomb. Lincoln's funeral train carries his body back to Springfield, Illinois for burial. The journey takes 2 weeks, stopping in cities along the way so mourners can pay respects. The White House is left to Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's vice president, a man utterly unprepared for the job. The building has witnessed its first presidential assassination. It will not be the last. Andrew Johnson is a tailor from Tennessee, a Southern Unionist who stayed loyal to the Union when Tennessee seceded. Lincoln chose him as vice president in 1864 to broaden the ticket, a Southerner balancing Lincoln's Northern base. But Johnson is racist, uneducated, temperamentally unsuited for leadership. He opposes Reconstruction, he vetoes civil rights legislation, he pardons former Confederates, he fights with Congress constantly. In 1868, the House of Representatives impeaches him for violating the Tenure of Office Act. He fired Secretary of War Edwin Stanton without Senate approval. The Senate trial is a spectacle. Johnson is acquitted by a single vote. He finishes his term isolated and powerless. He leaves the White House in March 1869, despised. The White House under Johnson proves that the building cannot save a failed president. It can only amplify the failure. Ulysses S. Grant, the Union's greatest general, becomes president in 1869. Grant is honest but politically naive. His administration is riddled with corruption, the whiskey ring, the credit mobilier scandal. Grant himself is not corrupt, but he trusts the wrong people. He expands the White House staff and begins professionalizing security. More doorkeepers, more guards, visitors are watched more closely. Grant serves 2 terms, 1869 to 1877, and leaves the presidency with his reputation damaged. But the White House itself is beginning to change. It is no longer just a residence, it is becoming an institution. The late 19th century brings technological transformation to the White House. Rutherford Hayes, 1877 to 1881, installs the first telephone in 1879. The number is 1. There is no switchboard. The phone sits in the telegraph room. Hayes also bans alcohol from the White House. His wife, Lucy, is a temperance advocate. State dinners serve water and lemonade. The press mockingly calls her Lemonade Lucy. James Alexander Garfield, 1881, serves only 4 months. On July 2, 1881, he is shot at a Washington train station by Charles Guiteau, a deranged office seeker who believed God told him to kill the president. Garfield does not die immediately. The bullet lodges near his spine. Doctors probe the wound with unwashed hands and instruments, searching for it. Infection sets in. Garfield lingers 11 weeks, much of that time in the White House, slowly dying from blood poisoning. He dies September 19, 1881. His funeral is held in the East Room. Again.
Chester A. Arthur, Garfield's vice president, becomes president. Arthur is a dandy, fastidious about appearance. He refuses to move into the White House until it is renovated to his standards. He hires Louis Comfort Tiffany to redesign the interior. Tiffany installs stained glass screens, elaborate mosaics, gilded decoration. The White House becomes ornate, almost gaudy. Arthur also expands the household staff. By 1885, about 25 people work full-time in the White House. All are paid employees now. Slavery ended in 1865, but the labor is still racialized. Most household staff are black. Most administrative staff are white. Grover Cleveland, 1885 to 1889 and 1893 to 1897, is the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. In 1886, he marries Frances Folsom in the White House, the only president to marry in the building itself. The wedding becomes a national spectacle. Privacy, already thin, evaporates further. Benjamin Harrison, 1889 to 1893, installs electric lights in 1891. The White House is among the first buildings in Washington with electricity. But Harrison and his wife are terrified of electrocution. They refuse to touch the light switches. Staff turn the lights on and off for them. William McKinley, 1897 to 1901, increases security after anarchist violence spreads in Europe. Guards are posted permanently at the gates, but it is not enough. On September 6, 1901, McKinley attends the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. An anarchist named Leon Solgas shoots him twice at point-blank range. McKinley dies 8 days later from gangrene. 3 presidents assassinated in 40 years: Lincoln, Garfield, McKinley. The White House cannot protect them because the threat is not the building. The threat is exposure, the necessity of being seen, the performance of democracy. Theodore Roosevelt, McKinley's vice president, becomes president at age 42, the youngest ever, and he will transform the White House more than anyone since it was built. Good Friday, April 14, 1865. Lincoln attends a play at Ford's Theater, Our American Cousin, a comedy. He wants distraction after 4 years of war. His bodyguard leaves his post to get a drink. At 10:15 p.m., John Wilkes Booth, a Confederate sympathizer and actor, enters the president's box. He shoots Lincoln in the back of the head with a Derringer pistol. Lincoln slumps forward. He never regains consciousness. He is carried across the street to a boarding house, the Peterson House. The White House is too far. He will die before they can get him there. Lincoln dies at 7:22 a.m. on April 15, 1865. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, standing at the bedside, reportedly says, "Now he belongs to the ages." Lincoln's body is returned to the White House. He lies in state in the East Room, the same room where his son Willie's funeral was held 3 years earlier. Thousands file past the open casket. The room is draped in black. The mirrors are covered. The White House has become a tomb. Lincoln's funeral train carries his body back to Springfield, Illinois for burial. The journey takes 2 weeks, stopping in cities along the way so mourners can pay respects. The White House is left to Andrew Johnson, Lincoln's vice president, a man utterly unprepared for the job. The building has witnessed its first presidential assassination. It will not be the last. Andrew Johnson is a tailor from Tennessee, a Southern Unionist who stayed loyal to the Union when Tennessee seceded. Lincoln chose him as vice president in 1864 to broaden the ticket, a Southerner balancing Lincoln's Northern base. But Johnson is racist, uneducated, temperamentally unsuited for leadership. He opposes Reconstruction, he vetoes civil rights legislation, he pardons former Confederates, he fights with Congress constantly. In 1868, the House of Representatives impeaches him for violating the Tenure of Office Act. He fired Secretary of War Edwin Stanton without Senate approval. The Senate trial is a spectacle. Johnson is acquitted by a single vote. He finishes his term isolated and powerless. He leaves the White House in March 1869, despised. The White House under Johnson proves that the building cannot save a failed president. It can only amplify the failure. Ulysses S. Grant, the Union's greatest general, becomes president in 1869. Grant is honest but politically naive. His administration is riddled with corruption, the whiskey ring, the Credit Mobilier scandal. Grant himself is not corrupt, but he trusts the wrong people. He expands the White House staff and begins professionalizing security. More doorkeepers, more guards, visitors are watched more closely. Grant serves 2 terms, 1869 to 1877, and leaves the presidency with his reputation damaged. But the White House itself is beginning to change. It is no longer just a residence, it is becoming an institution. The late 19th century brings technological transformation to the White House. Rutherford Hayes, 1877 to 1881, installs the first telephone in 1879. The number is 1. There is no switchboard. The phone sits in the telegraph room. Hayes also bans alcohol from the White House. His wife, Lucy, is a temperance advocate. State dinners serve water and lemonade. The press mockingly calls her Lemonade Lucy. James Alexander Garfield, 1881, serves only 4 months. On July 2, 1881, he is shot at a Washington train station by Charles Guiteau, a deranged office seeker who believed God told him to kill the president. Garfield does not die immediately. The bullet lodges near his spine. Doctors probe the wound with unwashed hands and instruments, searching for it. Infection sets in. Garfield lingers 11 weeks, much of that time in the White House, slowly dying from blood poisoning. He dies September 19, 1881.
His funeral is held in the East Room. Again. William Howard Taft is large, over 300 pounds. He gets stuck in the White House bathtub and requires a new one, custom-built, large enough to fit 4 normal-sized men. The story becomes legend, though probably exaggerated. Taft's real contribution to the White House is architectural. In 1909, he expands the West Wing and creates the Oval Office, the elliptical room that will become the most recognizable presidential workspace in the world. The shape is deliberate, no corners, no hierarchical seating positions. The president sits behind a desk facing the room, and visitors sit in chairs arranged in a gentle curve. The design suggests equality, openness, democracy. In practice, the president controls the room absolutely, but the symbolism matters. Taft serves 1 term and loses re-election to Woodrow Wilson in 1912. The White House now has its modern form: residence upstairs, ceremonial rooms on the first floor, offices in the West Wing, Oval Office at the center of presidential power. This structure will remain essentially unchanged for the next century. Woodrow Wilson, a former professor and university president, becomes president in 1913. He is intellectual, rigid, moralistic. He believes deeply in progressive reform and American exceptionalism. His first wife, Ellen, dies in the White House in August 1914 from kidney disease. Her death devastates Wilson. He remarries in 1915 to Edith Bowling Galt. The quick remarriage, 16 months after Ellen's death, scandalizes Washington society. In 1917, the United States enters World War I. The White House becomes a command center. Military aides move in. Telegraph and telephone lines multiply. The West Wing swells with staff. Wilson works relentlessly. He writes his own speeches, including the 14 points, his vision for post-war peace. After the war ends in November 1918, Wilson travels to Paris for the Paris Peace Conference. He negotiates the Treaty of Versailles and creates the League of Nations, an international body to prevent future wars. But the U.S. Senate refuses to ratify the treaty. Wilson returns to Washington and launches a national speaking tour to build public support. On September 25, 1919, in Pueblo, Colorado, Wilson collapses. He returns to Washington. On October 2, 1919, he suffers a massive stroke in the White House. The stroke paralyzes his left side. He is bedridden, unable to speak clearly, cognitively impaired. And here is where the White House enables a constitutional crisis. Edith Wilson, the First Lady, takes control. She restricts access to the president. Cabinet members and senators are turned away. She screens all documents, decides what Wilson sees, and allegedly makes decisions in his name. For 17 months, October 1919 to March 1921, the President of the United States is incapacitated, and his wife runs the government from the White House residence. It is effectively a coup, but it is hidden behind closed doors, enabled by the privacy of the White House. The public does not know how sick Wilson is. The press is told he is resting. Cabinet meetings are canceled. Vice President Thomas Marshall is not informed of the full extent of Wilson's condition. Wilson finishes his term in March 1921. He leaves the White House in a wheelchair, broken. He dies in 1924. The White House, by concealing Wilson's illness, allowed an unelected First Lady to wield presidential power. The lesson? The building's privacy is a double-edged sword. It can protect. It can also hide rot.
Warren G. Harding is handsome, charming, and spectacularly unqualified. He appoints friends, the Ohio Gang, to cabinet positions. They are corrupt. The most infamous scandal? Teapot Dome. Interior Secretary Albert Fall leases federal oil reserves at Teapot Dome, Wyoming, to private companies in exchange for bribes, hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash and bonds. Harding, in the White House, knows his administration is collapsing but cannot control it. He also conducts multiple affairs. Nan Britton, a woman 30 years younger, claims Harding fathered her child. She alleges they had sex in the White House coat closet. In 1923, Harding takes a cross-country train tour, partly to escape Washington, partly to rebuild his image. He dies suddenly in San Francisco on August 2, 1923. Official cause? Heart attack. Rumors persist that his wife, Florence, poisoned him to spare him from impeachment and disgrace. The rumors are probably false, but they reflect how completely Harding failed. His body is returned to Washington. The funeral is held in the East Room. The White House did not break Harding, but it revealed him, and revelation was fatal. Calvin Coolidge, Harding's vice president, becomes president. Coolidge is the opposite of Harding: quiet, honest, competent, boring. His presidency is uneventful economically. The Roaring Twenties boom continues. But personally, tragedy strikes. In June 1924, Coolidge's son, Calvin Jr., age 16, is playing tennis on the White House courts. He develops a blister on his toe. The blister becomes infected. In 1924, antibiotics do not exist. The infection spreads. Sepsis sets in. Calvin Jr. dies on July 7, 1924, in the White House. Coolidge is shattered. He later writes, "When he died, the power and the glory of the presidency went with him." Coolidge finishes his term but does not run for re-election in 1928. He leaves the White House depressed, withdrawn. He dies in 1933. The White House killed his son, not directly, but the proximity, the tennis courts, the minor injury, the inability to get proper medical care quickly enough cost Calvin Jr. his life. The building takes from everyone. Herbert Hoover enters the White House in March 1929 as a celebrated humanitarian and engineer. 7 months later, the stock market crashes. The Great Depression begins. Hoover believes the economy will self-correct. He resists direct federal intervention. He believes private charity will be sufficient. He is catastrophically wrong. By 1932, unemployment reaches 25%. Banks fail. Homeless encampments, mockingly called Hoovervilles, spring up in cities across America. Bread lines stretch for blocks. Hoover, in the White House, is insulated from the suffering. He cannot see the bread lines from his windows. The White House grounds are guarded. Protesters are kept blocks away. In 1932, World War I veterans marched to Washington, the bonus army, demanding early payment of promised bonuses. About 43,000 veterans and their families camped in vacant lots. Hoover orders the U.S. Army to clear them. General Douglas MacArthur, with tanks and tear gas, burns the veterans' camps. 2 veterans are killed. A baby dies from tear gas exposure. Hoover, watching from the White House, believes he made the right decision. The public sees a president using military force against desperate veterans. Hoover loses the 1932 election in a landslide to Franklin D. Roosevelt. He leaves the White House in March 1933, the most hated man in America. The White House made him blind. Isolation from reality destroyed him. Franklin Delano Roosevelt becomes president on March 4, 1933, in the depths of the Depression. He immediately transforms the presidency and the White House. Roosevelt holds the first radio fireside chat on March 12, 1933, explaining his banking policies directly to the American people. He bypasses the press and speaks into a microphone in the diplomatic reception room. Radio makes the president intimate. Millions of Americans hear his voice in their living rooms. The White House extends into every home. Roosevelt expands the executive branch massively. New Deal agencies proliferate: the WPA, CCC, TVA, SEC, FDIC. The West Wing cannot hold the growing staff. The Executive Office of the President is created in 1939. More buildings are added to the White House complex. But Roosevelt is also physically disabled. In 1921, he contracted polio. He is paralyzed from the waist down. He uses a wheelchair, though the press, by agreement, never photographs him in it. The White House is retrofitted for his disability. Ramps are installed, an elevator is added, doorways are widened. Roosevelt hides his disability from the public, but inside the White House, it shapes everything. He holds meetings in the Oval Office because he cannot easily move. People come to him. In 1939, war begins in Europe. Roosevelt, from the White House, prepares America for eventual involvement. When Japan attacks Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Roosevelt addresses Congress from the Capitol the next day, a date which will live in infamy. The United States enters World War II. The White House becomes a war headquarters. Maps cover the walls of the Oval Office and map room. Secure phone lines connect to London, Moscow, military bases worldwide. Winston Churchill visits and stays for weeks, conducting the war alongside Roosevelt. The Secret Service expands. Anti-aircraft guns are positioned on the roof. Blackout curtains cover windows. Air raid drills are conducted. A bomb shelter is constructed in the sub-basement, the precursor to the modern Presidential Emergency Operations Center, PEOC. Roosevelt works constantly. He sleeps 4 to 5 hours a night. His health deteriorates. By 1944, he has congestive heart failure, dangerously high blood pressure, and chronic fatigue. His doctors know he is dying. But he runs for a 4th term. He wins. On April 12, 1945, Roosevelt is in Warm Springs, Georgia, sitting for a portrait. He complains of a headache. Then he collapses. Cerebral hemorrhage. He dies within hours, age 63. His body is returned to Washington. The funeral is held in the East Room. Again, the pattern repeats. The White House as tomb. Harry S. Truman, Roosevelt's vice president, is sworn in that evening. He tells reporters, "I felt like the moon, the stars, and all the planets had fallen on me." Harry Truman inherits a war still being fought and a secret weapon he didn't know existed. Truman has been vice president for only 82 days. Roosevelt barely spoke to him. Truman was not informed about the Manhattan Project, the secret program to build an atomic bomb. When he becomes president, Secretary of War Stimson briefs him, "The bomb is ready." Japan refuses to surrender. Allied invasion of Japan is planned for November 1945. Estimated casualties, hundreds of thousands, possibly over 1 million. The bomb offers an alternative. Use it, force surrender, end the war. But the cost is the incineration of Japanese cities. Truman makes the decision from the White House. He consults advisors, but the final choice is his. August 6, 1945, atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Estimated 80,000 killed instantly, tens of thousands more from radiation. August 9, 1945, atomic bomb dropped on Nagasaki. Estimated 40,000 killed instantly. August 15, 1945, Japan surrenders. World War II ends. Truman writes in his diary, "We have discovered the most terrible bomb in the history of the world." He never publicly expresses regret. He insists it saved lives by avoiding invasion. But the weight is permanent. Because decisions made in the White House now carry apocalyptic consequences. The president can order the deaths of hundreds of thousands with a signature. The building becomes something new, the center of world-ending power. By 1948, engineers determined that the White House is structurally unsound.
The walls are cracking, the floors sag. During a reception, the ceiling of the Blue Room visibly flexes under the weight of people on the floor above. A leg of Margaret Truman's piano breaks through the floor of her second-floor bedroom. The building, built in 1800, rebuilt in 1815, renovated in 1902, is falling apart. Engineers survey the damage. The interior is collapsing. The wooden beams are rotted. The walls, load-bearing sandstone, are crumbling under stress. The recommendation? Gut the interior completely. In November 1948, the Trumans move out. They relocate to Blair House across Pennsylvania Avenue. Workers begin demolition. The interior of the White House is completely removed, walls, floors, ceilings, everything. Only the exterior sandstone shell remains, held up by temporary steel supports. Photographs from this period are startling. The White House is an empty shell. You can see straight through from Pennsylvania Avenue to the South Lawn. The reconstruction takes 4 years. A steel frame is built inside the sandstone shell. The building becomes essentially a modern structure wrapped in a historic facade. The rooms are reconfigured: modern plumbing, modern wiring, modern climate control. The basement is expanded, adding more secure storage and work areas. A bunker is built, officially called the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, PEOC. Located in the sub-basement under the East Wing, it is designed to protect the president during a nuclear attack. The cost? $5.7 million. When the Trumans move back in 1952, the White House looks the same from outside. But inside, it is a completely different building, modern, secure, hardened, and more isolated than ever. Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander in World War II, becomes president in 1953. The White House under Eisenhower becomes a Cold War command center. The threat is nuclear annihilation. The Soviet Union has atomic weapons. The arms race accelerates. Eisenhower creates the interstate highway system, partly for civilian use, partly so missiles and military equipment can move quickly across the country. The White House adapts. Communication systems expand. The Situation Room, a secure crisis management center, is created in the basement of the West Wing. Eisenhower serves 2 terms, 1953 to 1961, and leaves the White House warning of the military-industrial complex. John F. Kennedy moves in January 1961 with his wife Jackie and their young children, Caroline and John Jr. The White House becomes glamorous again. Jackie redecorates obsessively. She hates the Truman-era interiors, calls them a hotel. She launches a campaign to recover original White House furniture and art. She gives a televised tour in 1962, showing millions of Americans the restored rooms. The White House becomes a cultural icon. But underneath the glamour, the Cold War intensifies. In October 1962, Soviet missiles are discovered in Cuba, 90 miles from Florida. Kennedy faces the Cuban Missile Crisis from the White House. For 13 days, the world teeters on the edge of nuclear war. Kennedy receives constant updates in the Oval Office and Cabinet Room. CIA photographs show missile sites under construction. U.S. Navy establishes a blockade around Cuba. Soviet ships approach. The Joint Chiefs urge invasion. General Curtis LeMay tells Kennedy that a blockade is weak, compares it to appeasement. Kennedy ignores them. He negotiates secretly with Soviet Premier Khrushchev through back channels. On October 27th, a U.S. spy plane is shot down over Cuba. The Joint Chiefs demand retaliation. Kennedy waits. That same day, a Soviet submarine near the blockade, believing war has started, prepares to launch a nuclear torpedo. The launch requires approval from 3 officers. 2 agree. 1, Vasily Arkhipov, refuses. Arkhipov saves the world. Kennedy never knows how close it came. On October 28th, Khrushchev agrees to remove the missiles. Kennedy secretly agrees to remove U.S. missiles from Turkey. The crisis ends. Kennedy later estimates the odds of nuclear war were between 1 in 3 and even 1 in 2. The White House is now the place where decisions are made that could end human civilization. On November 22, 1963, Kennedy is assassinated in Dallas. His body is returned to the White House. He lies in state in the East Room, the same room where Lincoln, McKinley, Harding, and FDR lay. The ritual repeats. The White House absorbs another death. Lyndon Baines Johnson becomes president hours after Kennedy's death. He is a political giant, physically large, emotionally overwhelming, legislatively brilliant. From the White House, he passes the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Medicare, Medicaid, and the War on Poverty. He should be remembered as one of the great presidents. But Vietnam destroys him. Johnson escalates U.S. involvement. By 1968, over 500,000 American troops are in Vietnam. Casualties mount, protests erupt nationwide. The White House becomes a prison. Protesters gather outside the gates daily, chanting, "Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today?" Johnson hears them through the windows. He cannot sleep. He paces the White House at night. He watches 3 televisions simultaneously in the treaty room, obsessing over war coverage. He becomes paranoid. He believes the press hates him, intellectuals have betrayed him, protesters are communist agents. On March 31, 1968, Johnson addresses the nation from the Oval Office. He announces a bombing halt in Vietnam. Then, at the end, he says, "I shall not seek and I will not accept the nomination of my party for another term as your president." He quits. The White House broke him. The isolation, the pressure, the inability to escape the role, it was unbearable. Johnson leaves in January 1969. He returns to his Texas ranch, grows his hair long, chain smokes. He dies of a heart attack January 22, 1973, age 64. The White House didn't cause Vietnam, but it enabled Johnson's worst instincts, the secrecy, the paranoia, the belief he could control everything from that building. He couldn't. Richard Nixon enters the White House in January 1969, damaged but determined. He lost the 1960 election to Kennedy. He lost the 1962 California governor's race. Political obituaries were written. His 1968 comeback is remarkable, but the insecurity remains. Nixon trusts no one. He keeps lists of enemies. He drinks. He takes sleeping pills. And he installs a secret recording system in the Oval Office, Cabinet Room, and his hideaway office in the Executive Office building. Voice activated. Every conversation recorded. Why? Nixon later claims he wanted records for history. The truth is simpler: paranoia. He trusts no one. He wants proof of what people say. The takes become his downfall. On June 17, 1972, 5 men are arrested burglarizing the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex. They are connected to Nixon's re-election campaign. Nixon, from the White House, orchestrates the cover-up. He orders aides to lie. He directs the CIA to block the FBI investigation. He approves hush money payments. And the tapes record it all. As investigations proceed, Congress demands the tapes. Nixon refuses, executive privilege. The Supreme Court rules against him. He must turn them over. The tapes prove Nixon knew about the cover-up. He obstructed justice. He committed crimes. Impeachment is inevitable. On August 8, 1974, Nixon addresses the nation from the Oval Office. He resigns effective the next day. His final day, August 9th, is surreal. He gives a rambling farewell speech to his staff in the East Room. He talks about his mother. He quotes Theodore Roosevelt. He nearly cries. Then he walks to the South Lawn, boards Marine One, and leaves. He raises his arms in a V for victory sign. His face forces a smile. The image becomes iconic. A man destroyed, pretending strength. The helicopter lifts off. Nixon is gone. Gerald Ford, the vice president, is sworn in. He says, "Our long national nightmare is over." But the White House has proven something. It cannot save a president from himself. It can only magnify the flaws. Nixon's paranoia, enabled by the White House's secrecy and isolation, destroyed him. Gerald Ford serves from August 1974 to January 1977. His first major act, pardoning Nixon. The decision is controversial, but probably necessary to move the country forward. Ford survives 2 assassination attempts in 1975, both outside the White House. Security tightens further. Jimmy Carter wins the 1976 election and moves in January 1977. Carter tries to humanize the presidency. He walks to his inauguration instead of riding in a limousine. He wears cardigan sweaters during televised addresses. He installs solar panels on the White House roof. Reagan will remove them in 1986. But Carter is overwhelmed by crises: inflation, energy crisis, Iran hostage crisis. The White House cannot help him. The building isolates him from the country he's trying to lead. Carter loses re-election in 1980 to Ronald Reagan. He leaves the White House having accomplished less than he hoped, but unlike Johnson and Nixon, he leaves intact. No scandals, no breakdowns. The building did not break him, but it limited him. Ronald Reagan, a former actor, becomes president in January 1981 at age 69, the oldest elected president at that time. On March 30th, 1981, 70 days into his presidency, Reagan is shot outside the Washington Hilton Hotel. John Hinckley Jr., attempting to impress actress Jodie Foster, fires 6 shots. One hits Press Secretary James Brady in the head. One hits Reagan in the chest, collapsing his lung. Reagan is rushed to the hospital. He survives. But the shooting changes everything. The Secret Service expands massively. White House security becomes suffocating. Pennsylvania Avenue in front of the White House is closed to vehicle traffic in 1995 after the Oklahoma City bombing raises fears of truck bomb attacks. The perimeter is pushed farther out, barriers, bollards, reinforced fencing. The White House becomes a fortress. Ronald Reagan serves 2 terms, 1981 to 1989. He leaves the White House popular, but already showing signs of Alzheimer's disease, which will be diagnosed in 1994. George H.W. Bush, 1989 to 1993, serves 1 term. The Cold War ends on his watch. The Berlin Wall falls, the Soviet Union collapses. The White House is no longer the center of nuclear standoff, but it remains the center of global power. Bill Clinton, 1993 to 2001, brings scandal back to the White House. The Monica Lewinsky affair, Clinton's sexual relationship with a White House intern, becomes a media spectacle. Clinton is impeached by the House in 1998 for perjury and obstruction of justice. The Senate acquits him. The White House becomes a stage for national humiliation. Clinton cannot leave without facing cameras. He cannot eat at a restaurant without it becoming news. Cable news and the internet make him the most watched president in history. The White House is a fishbowl. Everyone is watching. Then comes September 11th, 2001. George W. Bush is president when hijacked planes strike the World Trade Center and Pentagon. Bush is in Florida, reading to school children when he receives the news. He is rushed to Air Force One. The Secret Service will not let him return to Washington immediately. The threat is unclear. Vice President Dick Cheney is in the White House when the evacuation order comes. Secret Service agents grab him, physically lift him, carry him to the PEOC bunker beneath the East Wing. Cheney takes command from the bunker. He authorizes fighter jets to shoot down civilian aircraft if necessary. When Bush finally returns that evening, he lands on the South Lawn. The White House is surrounded by armed guards, military vehicles, surface-to-air missiles. The transformation is complete. The White House is no longer a house. It is a hardened military target. Security measures after 9/11. Airspace above the White House becomes a no-fly zone enforced by fighter jets and surface-to-air missiles. Pennsylvania Avenue remains closed. Additional layers of fencing. Surveillance cameras everywhere. Rooftop snipers 24/7. The PEOC is upgraded with advanced communications and life support, chemical and biological threat sensors, radiation detectors. The staff grows to over 500 people. The annual budget for maintaining the White House exceeds $1 million, not including security, classified, but estimated over $100 million annually. The White House is now one of the most secure buildings on Earth and one of the most isolating. 2009 to 2017, Obama and the Modern Trap. Barack Obama becomes the first Black president in January 2009. He moves into a White House built by enslaved people. The symbolism is powerful, but the reality is isolation. Obama later reflects, the White House is the crown jewel of the American penal system. He cannot take his daughters for ice cream without a motorcade. He cannot walk outside without agents. He cannot have a private conversation. All calls are monitored. He is the most powerful person in the world, and he cannot open a window. Obama serves 2 terms, 2009 to 2017. He leaves having aged visibly, gray hair, deep lines. The White House took its toll. 2017 to 2021, Trump and chaos. Donald Trump, a real estate developer and reality TV star, becomes president in January 2017. Trump uses the White House differently. He holds rallies on the South Lawn. He tweets constantly. He treats the building as a stage for performance. But the isolation still applies. Trump reportedly spends hours alone in the residence, watching cable news, growing increasingly paranoid about leaks and disloyalty. The White House, no matter who occupies it, imposes the same constraints. 2021 to present, Biden and the continuity. Joe Biden becomes president in January 2021 at age 78, the oldest inaugurated president. He moves into the same White House, the same constraints, the same isolation. The building does not change. The role does not change. Every president discovers the same truth. The White House is not yours. You belong to it. The cost of living there. What does the White House cost? Not in dollars, in humanity. Every president loses privacy. You cannot open a window, walk alone, make a private phone call. Freedom of movement. Every trip requires a motorcade. You become a spectacle. Mental health. The stress, the isolation, the decisions, it breaks everyone eventually. Relationships. Marriages strain. Children grow up in a fishbowl. Friendships become impossible. Health. Every president ages faster. The stress is visible in photographs. Sanity. The weight of decisions, wars, deaths, consequences haunts you. The White House offers power. It takes everything else. The ghosts. The White House is haunted. Not literally, probably not, but every president reports feeling the weight of history. Lincoln's ghost is seen most often, standing at windows, walking hallways. Grace Coolidge saw him. Winston Churchill encountered him. Harry Truman heard footsteps. Are the stories true? Probably not, but they reflect something real. The building remembers. Every decision made here echoes. Every death leaves a mark. The White House is haunted by consequence. Who owns the White House? We return to the question, who actually owns the White House? Not the president, they are temporary tenants. Not the government, it is a symbol beyond bureaucracy. Not the people, they fund it but cannot enter freely. The White House owns itself. It is a symbol that has become autonomous. It demands performance. It demands sacrifice. It consumes the people who live inside. And it endures. Since 1800, every president except Washington has lived here, 46 presidents. All left changed, some left broken, some left in coffins. None left the same person who entered. The lesson. Beauty is not enough. Symbols without humanity are prisons. The White House was designed to project power. It does, but power has a price. Grand visions need resources. The White House has unlimited resources, but resources without adaptation guarantee failure, and the White House resists adaptation. The building wants tradition, it wants performance, it wants sacrifice. And it gets what it wants, because the White House is not just a building, it is a machine. It processes presidents, it inputs ambition, it outputs legacy, and the cost is paid in human suffering. Who paid for the White House? Enslaved workers who built it? Yes. Immigrants who rebuilt it after the fire? Yes. Soldiers who guarded it during wars? Yes. Presidents who aged 20 years and ate? Yes. First ladies who endured scrutiny? Yes. Children who grew up watched? Yes. Staff who serve invisibly? Yes. The American people who funded and pay the cost of decisions made inside? Yes. Everyone paid. And everyone still pays, because the White House is not history, it is present. Right now, someone is living there, aging faster than they should, feeling the walls close in. The White House will outlast them. It always does. The final truth. Can power make you immortal if it slowly destroys everyone who touches it? No. Power does not make you immortal. It makes you a ghost. Every president becomes a ghost, not literally, but historically. Lincoln still walks those halls as a standard. FDR still sits in that wheelchair as a memory. Kennedy still dies in Dallas as a warning. The White House collects ghosts, and one day the current president will be a ghost too. Their portrait will hang, their decisions will be studied, their failures will be lessons, and a new president will move in and think, I will be different. They will be wrong, because the White House does not care who you are. You belong to it. The lights are always on, the building never sleeps, the symbol cannot rest, and the White House endures. Beautiful, yes, but that is just the facade. If you enjoy deep investigations into American power and the buildings that house it, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments, which government building should we explore next? The Capitol, the Pentagon, the Supreme Court? These places aren't just buildings, they're chapters in America's story, built by real people, paid for with real costs, preserved through real struggle. Every symbol has its shadows, every dream has its price. The White House survived because it learned to take. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next investigation.